I always like it when video games play with scale. There's something about drastically changing the size and conventions of things we're normally used to that I find oddly refreshing in a way. Some games might turn the player into something of a god that towers over their defenseless creatures and creations, but what I really like are those games that do the exact opposite. Games where puddles become entire oceans, and a simple test like walking up the stairs becomes a challenge akin to hiking up a mountain. Chibi Robo and Pikmin are two good examples of what I'm talking about. These games knock it out of the park when it comes to making the player feel meager in relatively normal worlds. And I recently started playing a game called Little Nightmares that not only follows that concept but twists it into something grotesque. Little Nightmares is a puzzle platformer by independent developers Tarsier Studios that doubles, or I guess triples, as a horror game. On my researching quest to figure out what else these guys have made, I found out they've actually been around since 2004, but didn't have a game of their own to speak of until 2017. But that's not entirely fair of me to say. They did have one project under their belt called City of Metronome, an adventure game with an art style that reminds me of something by Tim Burton or Shane Acker, the guy who made 9. City of Metronome was shown off and pitched at E3 2005, but went unreleased due to Tarsier being unable to find a publisher. It looked interesting enough artistically, but I don't think this trailer does the actual game any justice. It's mostly just shots of them walking around slowly and showing off things happening in the world with no real gameplay at all besides some slow combat. But after that, Tarsier would go on to do work for other games, including the Little Big Planet series. I think the fact that Little Big Planet is a game that takes place in a storybook-like setting where you're a little hero running around actually rubbed off on Tarsier when they would go on to create Little Nightmares, their first fully original and actually released video game thanks to making a publishing deal with Bandai Namco. Little Nightmares is one of those games I've always seen and wanted to play but never really got around to until now. It centers around a little raincoat girl named Six who finds herself trapped in an iron vessel called the Maw, and it's up to us to help her find a way out. It's a game that doesn't tell you its story through dialogue or text, but relies on you to make your own interpretations. Believe it or not, the only way we know the names of anything in this game is through official descriptions and tweets and promotional material, etc. It starts near instantly after you select New Game. Six wakes up from a nightmare she has of a masked lady, and after that you're free to go. There's no hand-holding, there's no drawn-out tutorial, the game makes you learn everything yourself and sends you on your way. With this being a platformer, you'll be doing a lot of running and jumping to get around, as well as sliding to help you in some tight spots, but there's actually not a lot Six is capable of doing beyond that. Besides grabbing and climbing things, that is. Mostly Six will rely on using everything in her environment to get around, so you'll have to drag this minecart here to jump onto a door handle, or jump on this side of the seesaw and quickly run to the other side to get on top of these drawers. You can climb pretty much everything you see in this game as well. Ladders, cages, stacks of books, stacks of plates. As long as Six can grab it and pull herself up, she can climb it. You also have a lighter that helps you see in some of the game's darker spots, but that's it as far as controls go. There's a little startup to Six's movement that I really like because it feels like there's weight to her character, and every long jump you have to make from running and jumping is more satisfying due to the momentum you need to build up as a result. There's no jumping from a fixed position and magically changing your direction in midair to land wherever you want. You have to earn it. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't help so much in this regard. The biggest enemy of jumping from platform to platform or just navigating the world in this game is depth perception. This was a bigger problem for me than it should have been. It's hard to tell how much space you have left on these platforms sometimes. There were so many times I ended up falling because I thought I was aligned with something I had to jump to, only to end up missing due to not being able to tell when to jump, and if I did, there was a 50-50 chance I'd undershoot my target or completely miss. This wasn't exclusive to jumping between platforms either. Sometimes I died just walking off stairs or walkways or between screens because I thought I was aligned with them well enough, but I guess not. You know, what would have really helped is giving the player more control over the camera, where we're actually able to rotate it around the center of the stage, or maybe just zoom into Six a little more instead of just being able to pan it around. I get they were going for a cinematic thing, forcing their own perspectives, but I think it comes at too much of a detriment to the player. There is a saving grace to the bad depth of field though. You can just hold the grab button instead of timing when you press it to hold onto a ledge. At first I thought it was a good idea to just hold this throughout the entire game, but you'll end up picking up or clinging onto random objects, and that's not very helpful. So just remember to hold the grab button whenever you walk somewhere narrow. You'll grab the ledge and be able to pull yourself up. Don't let the bad perspective stop you from exploring though. This is a very beautiful game. I could get lost for hours just observing everything inside this ship. The muted colors and vast size of the maw makes the game feel very cold and desolate, but this game doesn't stick to one aesthetic. The hull of the ship feels more industrial with heavy usage of metal and everything, but by the end of the game you'll be in a relatively lavish Japanese bedroom. The game has a very soft look to it too, almost like it's all claymation. I think the lighting system helps a lot in this regard. It does a good job at highlighting those little creases and folds and cracks and everything that makes it feel like it was all handcrafted. And look at how almost everything is beveled to have round edges. All the models are lopsided too, in a way that makes the world feel very lived in. Yeah, this world just feels very alive. Whether it's seeing dozens of these hulking creatures walking around or hearing these faint sounds you can't discern from the ship itself or its inhabitants. There's always something going on that keeps your interest. The game also rewards you for searching every little nook and cranny with hidden collectibles all throughout the game. They come in the form of statues you have to throw and break, lamps you have to light, and these little creatures called gnomes you have to hug. Fun fact, these little gnomes are a reference to some creatures that were in the city of Metronome, and this little picture in the suitcase 6 was sleeping in is too. Maybe Tarja will return to City of Metronome in the future since they're not apprehensive about mentioning it. There's no benefit to the actual gameplay in finding every collectible in this game, but you unlock concept art you can see from the main menu. This stuff is so gross, I love it. As far as the puzzles go in this game, they aren't very puzzling. Most of the time you'll be pushing something here or cranking something there, but the real challenge comes from staying out of the monster's sight and getting something done before they grab you. 6 is put in a place of almost complete vulnerability as she's only a tiny child with no reliable means of defending herself from these monsters, save for some sections of the game where you're allowed to fight back. They're faster and stronger than 6, but she actually has an advantage in her small size. She can take refuge in the shadows where she can't be seen to evade all enemies. I read the developers consider it a game of hide and seek more than stealth because you're playing as a child and sneaking around this place makes you seem all the more mischievous. The word stealth also gives the impression that you're hiding out of choice rather than an inability to fight back at all. One of my biggest pet peeves in horror games is seriously being unable to just pick up a random pipe or knife to fight back against these enemies instead of being forced to cower in the shadows, but fleeing works in Little Nightmares because seriously, what can 6 physically do against these guys? The game is split into multiple chapters and different enemies occupy each one. In the first one, you're evading this janitor with short legs but long, lanky arms. He's blinded himself with rags over his eyes, or maybe that's his skin drooping down his face, it's hard to tell. You think that would make it easy to get around him, but he makes up for being blind by having really good hearing. He's easily able to hear things you bump into, or the wood creaking if you step on it, so just stick to the carpet where your footsteps won't make any sound. There's also the twin chefs. These guys don't have a gimmick like the janitor who's blind, but there's 2 of them so you have more to worry about. These guys were my favorite by far. The more you learn about them, the more you're gonna be grossed out. Like, why do they have double toilets? They're too big to fit on one, right? So do they split the difference? And did he just lift his face to scratch himself? So many questions. Next up are the guests. Contrary to what I said earlier, you don't actually hide from these guys that much. Instead, 6 will get away from them by running right in front of their grubby malformed faces and dodging their fat little hands. The vibe I got was these guys are elites of some kind, being able to eat as much food as they want and having eyes wide shut parties. Despite their numbers, they're really the least harmful monsters. They want to get at you, but they're usually more than happy with going back to the food that's right in front of them instead of chasing you down. The last monster is a mask-wearing geisha named the Lady, who's the only one of these guys with supernatural powers, being able to teleport and drain your life force. She seems to be the leader of the maw, overseeing all of its inhabitants and living in tidier quarters than everyone else. She goes as quickly as she comes though. We barely spend any time in the final chapter with her. Literally, we just enter her room, go through a 20-second chase, and have a quick little boss battle. I guess I get why they limit her time so much. much. She could capture us easily if she wanted to. I just would have appreciated more time spent with her to make her feel like the big scary threat that she should have been. As a matter of fact, this game isn't very scary at all. Unsettling is a more fitting word, I'd say. The monsters and atmosphere are filthy and off-putting, but when it comes to actually scaring the pants off of me, this game falls short. There's a little panic when you're spotted and the monster shrieks and they start chasing you down, but all of that goes away quickly because it's very easy to escape these guys. Just find a box or something to hide in and wait for them to go away. And that's not to say this game didn't have its moments though. This game was at its spookiest to me when there was no fanfare to the enemies at all. The tension whenever the janitor just drops in on you and it's like, oh fuck, what do I do? Is he gonna notice me? Or how about when you call this elevator down and one of the chefs is already on it and you have to mad dash your way back to safety? I wish the game had more oh shit moments like that. The chapters are pretty repetitive too. Each one starts with a long shot of the next enemy to come and then you'll be evading them for a few rooms. The final part either has a grand chase sequence or a boss battle and then repeat. And I know I just shit on the game for being too easy when you get chased, but I'll admit these sequences are definitely my favorite parts of the game. I love that rush when the enemy spots you when you're on edge because these levels are so tightly designed you'll just barely be escaping their grasp, and just when they're about to reach 6 she makes that final leap to safety and it's fun. This is a pretty short game though, so it being repetitive doesn't really get all that annoying. It took me just over an hour and a half to beat it the first time, and I was just under an hour and a half on my second playthrough where I went for all the collectibles and had to occasionally look at a guide. My last run didn't even hit an hour. The short length also lends to this game being very replayable. I could see this being a really fun game to speedrun for that fact. It's really easy to memorize the layout of this ship and each room and what you're supposed to do in each one. You get really intimate with the maw inside and out, but really, what is the maw? I mean, there's a greater story to be told here about it. There's a greater story to be told here about everything. Why is the maw both a prison for the children and a luxurious place for all these people to stuff their faces? Why is the janitor so obsessed with dolls? Why is there a chair behind this mirror? It's not a one-way mirror, right? All we know for certain is 6 is trapped in the maw with a bunch of unkind evildoers. Like I said, Little Nightmares is a very show-don't-tell game with an abstract story, but there are themes the game tries to get across. The most prominent one is hunger. I didn't mention it earlier, but the working title before they settled on Little Nightmares was Hunger. It's obviously shown by the guest, but hunger affects 6 as well, and in a different way. While these gluttons eat as much food as they desire, 6 only eats as a necessity. It's not like she doesn't eat out of having a lack of options either. A good chunk of the game takes place in a kitchen filled with food, and she doesn't chow down once. It's only when 6 has those hunger pains intense enough to buckle her to her knees that 6 decides to eat, and her cravings get stronger each time. She goes from eating a tiny piece of bread to a tiny chunk of meat to a live rat to one of the gnomes. Something else this game deals with is true nature. A lot of these characters are two-faced in a way, but this mostly has to do with the lady. She's the only character in the game who actually seems to care about their appearance, and obviously holds herself to a higher standard than everyone else. But what is it about her own reflection that she hates so much? Like, it physically harms her to see her own reflection. Is that why she wears the mask and all of these other mirrors have been broken? We see her beaten for him at the end of the game, and she's obviously a monster like the rest of them. Little Nightmares also plays with the idea of 6 being an unreliable narrator who might just be doing some embellishing here and there. Let's not forget, she's just a child, so who's to say if this world is really as deformed as it seems? The towering bedrooms and oddly proportioned creatures could all be a result of 6's twisted perspective as a child who rightfully fears for her life. I mean, the devs themselves have said as much.
Emphasize or personify the kind of visions or how children would see things, and let us re-experience it as players. That is really important to us. That to kind of show what she sees, basically. Yeah.
And it's real to her then.
It's definitely real to her, but
Here's another hint to the fact you can't completely trust Six. Each time you respawn, she jolts out of her sleep as if what just happened didn't really, and she only had a nightmare. I don't really consider this a theme of the game, but I think it adds to the experience as a whole. On top of the Little Nightmares game, Tarsier has also released other material expanding this world, including comics and mobile games, and a set of DLC called Secrets of the Maw. This DLC follows a new character called the Runaway Kid instead of Six, and takes place at the same time as the base game. It controls mostly the same, but has one difference in that the Runaway Kid doesn't have a lighter like Six. Instead, he has a flashlight, which I really like because you can point it. It works effectively in the puzzles and some of the scary parts, even in combat. Yeah, they added some smaller enemies this time to shake things up. I did have a problem with the game crashing though, which never happened in the original game, only the DLC. But besides that, I thought the DLC was just as fun as the main game. There are actual puzzles you have to solve this time, which gets a thumbs up from me. I like the twist at the end too that connects the Runaway Kid to Six's story, but I don't want to spoil it because it's really emotional. And there's other bonus content too, and special masks that Six can wear. You get the lady's mask after breaking enough statues, but the other ones are unlocked by purchasing them or using special codes you can get from the Bandai Namco website. The best costume is only in the Nintendo Switch version of the game though. If you have a Pac-Man amiibo, you can use it on this game, and Six's raincoat actually turns into a gross wrinkly Pacu mask with a gaping mouth. I wish this game had more mods. I would totally rock that as a skin. But man, I just like Little Nightmares a lot. It's not a perfect game, but there's just so much here to fall in love with. The atmosphere, the subject matter, the scale of it all. Little Nightmares is a game I can seriously see myself coming back to every so often just because it's so fun and quick to get through. That might be a knock against the game for some people, but if you really want more Little Nightmares, there's a sequel out called Little Nightmares 2. This time there's 2 children instead of 1 Six. I'll get around to it one day, but I gotta say, as far as the original goes, play it. Hey everyone, it's Cosmo. The Danganronpa 2 video is still on the way. I just wanted to do something smaller in between. Also, I don't have a weekly upload schedule or anything like I used to. I think the videos come out rushed like that, and I like just posting the videos when they're done. But let me know what you think of this one below. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.